My name is Nancy Pedri. I'm the curator of Town, St. John's, and Comics, and I am on the True North Country Comics podcast.
Welcome to the True North Country Comics podcast, dedicated to promote Canadian comic book and graphic novel creators and supporters. I'm John Swinimer. On this episode, I chat with Nancy Pedri about the Town, St. John's and Comics anthology published by Black Panel Press. Please like and subscribe to this website by hitting the subscribe button so you'll be notified about new podcast interviews and article posts. This podcast is available wherever podcasts are enjoyed. Please like, follow, and subscribe. Nancy Pedri is a professor of English at Memorial University of Newfoundland and Labrador, where she's taught since 2006. She's an award-winning author and has published extensively in the fields of comic studies, visual narratology, and word and image studies, including photography and literature. She's also edited or co-edited over 10 books or special issues of journals. Her latest monographs on comics, Experiencing Visual Storyworlds, Focalization in Comics with Silke Horstkotte from Ohio State UP, and a Concise Dictionary of Comics, UP of Mississippi, were published in 2022. Nancy is a curator of the recently published graphic novel Town, St. John's and Comics. Town, St. John's and Comics, published by Black Panel Press, is a graphic anthology that captures the spirit of St. John's, Newfoundland and Labrador, its crooked streets, tangled wires, salt-stained houses, and the people who live in them. Told by artists who call this place home, each story spotlights a different neighborhood, from Rabbittown to Rawlin's Cross, through a unique visual voice. Some are funny, some melancholic, some bursting with color, and others inked in black and white, but all of them share the same beating heart, a deep connection to place. It's not just a comic about a city. It's a comic of a city, shaped by it, inspired by it, and possible without it. So, without further ado, here's my chat with Nancy Pedri about the Town, St. John's and Comics anthology, published by Black Panel Press. So, Nancy Pedri, thank you very much for taking time to chat with me.
Thank you for inviting me.
I appreciate your time. Before we get going with all the questions, I would like to know, what was the first comic book that you read?
I read my first comic book as a PhD student in Toronto, and it was Mouse by Art Spiegelman, if you can imagine that.
Wow.
Yeah, that was a long time ago. I wrote my final chapter of my dissertation on Mouse.
For a first comic book interaction, that's pretty heavy.
It sure is. I wasn't a fan growing up, but as an adult, I fell in love with long-form comics, and that's my specialty.
Very good. Well, we're here talking today about a special comic book anthology, but before I get going with that, I would like to know if you could talk a little bit more about your day job. What do you do?
I'm a professor of English at Memorial University. I'm also the head of that department, and there I started in 2006. And then in about 2009, I believe, a colleague of mine and myself, we decided that we needed some comic courses on the books. And we introduced the first introduction to comics to the St. John's community, to Mun community.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. I wish I had that when I was in school. Usually I do an annual roundup of courses available in Canada to students, and it's amazing and impressive that there are more and more being developed each year, in fact.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. We've expanded at Memorial University. We now have graphic memoir or autobiography in comics. We have graphic medicine or medicine in comics, and we have various graduate courses on comics. So comics community is quite vibrant in the department.
So if I were to ask you this loaded question, do you think comic books and graphic novels should be literature? I'm sure the answer would be yes, right?
They are literature, not should be. They are literature. They most definitely are.
Glad to hear that. I'm sure a lot of the listeners we appreciate that as well. So we're here talking about the new comic book anthology called Town, St. John's and Comics. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about it. Maybe what was your role in creating that anthology?
Oh, my role was, well, I'm an official editor of the anthology or curator of it, but my role was really I conceived of the project probably 2 years before I contacted the artists. Then I reached out to some of the local artists that I know, and then they reached out to other artists, and together we sat around my kitchen table and I pitched this idea that St. John's has many lovely, beautiful, vibrant neighborhoods, and that each artist grew up in a different one. And so they have many memories held in those neighborhoods. And I said, we should do it a little bit like a French album, because that's what inspired the project for me, was a French album called Tour à Tour, which is a similar type of project. And we put a page limit on the stories. And together we sat around and kind of workshopped our stories. I had to conceive of the introduction. Then Paul Tucker came in and designed the book. And together with me, we chose the cover page and the end papers. It was a long project in the making, but totally a joy to work with these artists. Really wonderful, wonderful creative minds.
I bet. Yeah, I've met some of them over the years, but maybe you could just reference just a few. You've already mentioned Paul Tucker, but who else was helping with this book?
Yep, we have Leon Chung, Kelly Basto, we have Mike Fian, Wallace Ryan, of course, Sam Din, who came through MUN in some of my courses, Andrew Hawthorne, Kevin Wilridge also. Those
Very
are
good.
our 8 artists.
Lots of great talent there, that's for sure. Now, you mentioned your role as an editor curator. Can you get into the nitty gritty of how you actually helped each of the creators?
Yeah, so I would try to help them through focusing on their stories and trying to iron out some of their questions about the stories and how long. But mostly I provided a space for them to sit around a table and discuss their ideas amongst each other. I'm not an artist, so I was not very hands on. I believe artists can do their work better than I can. So I allow them or invite them to do the type of work they would like to do. So there weren't many regulations except for that timelines and length of stories. Timelines were a little bit difficult to meet sometimes, but together we got through them. So it was really my role to decide on some of the structural issues, but we did most of it together, I have to say. When we sat down around that table and the book was finally becoming a concrete reality, so people would bring artwork and sketches and ideas. Once that started happening, then I would propose some of the design and things like the map we thought about together at the beginning of the story. So my role was really support and a little bit of guidance, but they guided each other. They're all pretty much professional artists, right? They weren't a hard group to work with. I didn't have to edit too much or anything like that.
Glad to hear. I've heard the role of the editor is an unsung hero when it comes to creating comic books and graphic novels, and sometimes it's referred to as a role of herding cats, but sounds like you were able to manage it quite well.
Yeah, you have to keep the energy up and the excitement going, right? That's your job. And people have other tasks and other projects on the go. And your job is to keep this one really in their minds and keep the momentum up and the excitement about the book. And
Sure.
then after the book is done, then you organize launches and promote the book as best you can. So,
Right.
which doesn't need a lot of my energy because they're selling like hotcakes. So
That's
it's
great.
a it's a product people want, especially
Absolutely.
now that Christmas is around the corner. People are thinking they can go through the mail very quickly,
Yes, yes. Now,
if the mail.
yeah, that's another story we'll get to later. But now that you've got Town St. John's and Comics done, are there plans for a follow-up? And maybe will it be tied to the next edition of the St. John's Comic Arts Festival?
Yeah, the coinciding of the launch with the festival was done on purpose. That was also through me, I guess, as editor, seeing that I co-organized the festival and launched that idea. And so together they worked quite well. When we were at the book launch, a gentleman who attended there said to me, the next one has to be the Bay or Bay. So it might be a sequence for the Bay, around the Bay and different communities and habits and customs and stories from around the Bay. The artists are already excited about a second one. We would probably try to collect some other artists. An idea, I think, is we should probably extend into, we should extend into Labrador and try to get artists from different parts of the province. I don't know if a second one on St. John's would be warranted, but perhaps. I don't know. I'm collecting feedback right now.
Ah, okay, yeah. I mean, a lot of people don't realize, like I was born in St. John's and only sort of lived in that area, being ignorant of the rest of the province and even Labrador. A lot of people just don't understand how vast the province is.
That's right. So there's many possibilities, right, for increasing this kind of project, and maybe it can become like a 4-part series. I mean, there's many neighborhoods of St. John's that haven't been covered here. And again, there's the Bay and there's other communities in our province that I think they have stories to tell and neighborhoods that come to life. So I would love to work with other artists on a similar project.
Sure. No, I apologize. I wasn't able to make it to the St. John's Comic Arts Festival. I wanted to ask you, how was that event for you? How did it turn out?
My goodness, it exceeded all expectations. I can tell you that it was an amazing event. It took place over 2 days, the actual event, but it had quite a few events leading up to it. So we had talks at the Hunter Library, talks at the LSPU Hall, workshops. But the event attracted over 600 people over the 2 days. There were about 26, I think, 23, 26 vendors who said they had great sales, excellent sales, a lot of people going through there. There were people of all ages that went through. We had children and we had elderly people. But most importantly, what touched my heart was that we had cartoonists that came out and just found community. People who found the courage to show their art, display their art, sell their art. It was wonderful to see this community of comic artists coming together and supporting each other. So we gave out our first Captain Newfoundland Award, which was fantastic. We also had workshops so that people could learn to draw or ink or paint. And then we had panels that just spanned everything from the history of comics in St. John's to things like what does it take to publish a comic. We also had people who have published comics giving advice to people who would like to publish comics, to aspiring cartoonists. So it was a fun-filled 2 days. Really, really amazing.
Yeah, I heard some really positive feedback from Scott Chandler and Jason Lapidus, who were both there, just
That's
just
right.
flowing about the event, and can't wait for the next one. So glad to hear. Glad to hear. So I got to ask you then, the book itself is available through Black Panel Press if people want to get it, but where can people find out more about you and your scholarly work?
The book is also available everywhere downtown. It's through all the shops. Where can they find out about me? They can go to Amazon. They can go to my website. You just punch in my name and you'll get my whole CV. There's a lot of work I have been doing. One of my other fun projects. So this was just a fun project for me. Another fun project I did is a concise comics dictionary. And that was a fun little dictionary that is both a tool for scholars and a tool for readers. I also have other books and things like that. Many articles you can find online and also in the libraries. So it's just a matter of going to my website.
Ah, very good. I wanted to ask you just quickly follow up about the comics dictionary that you mentioned, the Concise Dictionary of Comics. What is that all about?
So that book started, this has a really great story. It started at a comics conference in Michigan where Diana Schultz was speaking. And she was saying that people should not talk comics if they don't know the language. And I was in the crowd and I didn't know who she was. She's actually a very big editor of comics for the big three. But anyway, I challenged her and said, absolutely not. People should be teaching comics even if they don't know the language, because comics, if we don't teach it, it'll never become an established field. We're talking 10 years ago or even more. Anyway, we had a little bit of a scuff right in front of the 200 people crowd. And then I walked away and thought, my goodness, like, how can someone say this at a keynote? Anyway, then she sent me an email and said, oh, you're Nancy Pedri. That's great. You know what? I think we were saying the same thing. And we started chatting back and forth. And it turned out we were saying the same thing, that the language needed to be a little bit more standardized, collected, cleared up. And so she said, you know, Nancy, you're the perfect person to write that dictionary. And so I started the dictionary on a hot, sunny day in New Mexico. And It just was like I had my iPad open all the time. So as I was writing my article, I would come across different words and terminology that needed to go in the dictionary. And I would go from my laptop to the iPad and just keep putting in terms. And that turned into a tiny little book. It's a really cute thing. It came out with Mississippi University Press. Downtown Comics has some copies of it. Then I got a phone call some years ago by a director of the Charles Schultz Library, and he said it sits right beside his Oxford Dictionary on the desk. It was a very
Wow.
proud day for me. It was a
That's
very,
very cool.
very proud day.
Nice.
So,
Good stuff.
yeah. Yeah.
That's terrific. Well, Nancy, those are all the questions I have for you, but I'm wondering, is there something I didn't ask that you'd like to get across this interview?
I'd like to get across why comics are really important to read. Comics have had a long, long history of being for children or being full of vulgar language and sex and crime and this and that. And I just wanted to say to the folks that listen to you that if you haven't picked up a comic book, go and pick one up. Take a look because you'll be dazzled by the art. You'll be surprised by how much story can be in so few words. And that storytelling practice of words and images will just sit inside of you, and it can tell you stories about personal experiences with illness or with love or with death. It can tell you adventure stories and bring you to lands you didn't think could have ever exist. Comics can literally just calm you down after a long day's work. They can make you see a lot of different things, and they can be shared among family members of all ages because they speak to a wide variety of people, which is quite a swanky little thing. That's the whole point. Go out and read them.
Thanks to Nancy for the chat. You can discover more about Nancy Pedri on the Memorial University website. That's mun.ca/English/NPEDRI. And you can discover more about Town, St. John's, and comics on blackpanelpress.com. And thank you for tuning in to the True North Country Comics podcast. I invite you to visit the True North Country Comics website to listen to even more conversations from creators about making comic books and graphic novels. I also encourage you to subscribe via the website so you'll be notified about new podcast interviews and article posts. This podcast is available wherever podcasts are enjoyed. Please like, follow, and subscribe. You can follow True North Country Comics on most social media sites, and you're encouraged to send any and all feedback to john@truenorthcountrycomics.com. Thanks for tuning in, and come back soon for another episode. Bye for now. True North Country Comics Podcast is copyright True North Country Comics, copyright 2025.